Mr. President, Icelandair, and guests. Yes, I'm a humble architect from Copenhagen. I'm the planners normally that are creating attractions and making sort of all the strategic tools transformed into what you can call the physical reality, the things people are experiencing. Well, one of the things there is that we are using some tools, and this you can, if you ask any planners in the attraction business, they would use them differently. But we sort of try to get into the notion of each project. And as an example, for example, if you're building a school, the parents and the teachers would like you to build some that is secure. But what is security? Is it a sort of gated thing, or is it videotaped, or what is it? And the same with attractions. There's a lot of notions, words that you have to transform. So I've taken the liberty of looking at Iceland as a park, as a sort of attraction at all, and using some of the tools. So the first part of the presentation would then be some small examples from my studio, and the next would be the test case of Iceland with some lines out from that. So my studio was established in '91, and we have been making sort of three fields as our specialty. It's attraction, education, and development. And the first thing is Arken outside Copenhagen. I designed, and this was the sort of metaphor of a ship. That doesn't matter so much. The more interesting part here is over here. It's the Icelandic artist Olaf Eliasson. I know that there's a discussion whether he's Danish or Icelandic, but we say he's both. I call him Icelandic here in honor of you. And he had made a fog chamber, a sort of 60 meters long tube with artificial fog in and light and color, which people was totally scared about, and a fantastic experience. That's the perception. That's the feeling you have when you... and that is a thing that the internet, all the technology and all the things we're talking about, that can't compete with that. It can't compete with the actual feeling on the body. The sort of perception in your eyes, your ears, and the smell, that's unbeatable. And but it's difficult to sell, of course, on the internet. But when you're there, you, of course, will feel that. Next one is... No, I'll skip that fast. But it's a school outside Copenhagen, but there's a playfield on the roof, a sports facility here, a playfield outside with amphi, and then this sports facility is also a theater and a school and a sort of leisure area. So this that is multifunction, that you use a lot of things that interact, is a trend that is going on in the planning of all things, both attractions and architecture, for the last 10 years. And these are development projects, and the common from them, this is in Poland, and this is in Athens, and this is in Mecca. And the common from them are that they want some modern, but they want the link to their history. They want the storytelling of where they are. So in Poland it was these cultural elements situated on stairs. In Greece it was their mythology, that they want the stories of their gods and everything put into a entertainment area, because some of the young peoples in Greece didn't know so much about all the mythology which Greece is very known for. And here in Mecca it was a city we should check out on 1 million square meters for pilgrims, just opposite the Black Stone, the holy Muslim thing. And it was, again, with the notion, it should be modern, but it should be Saudi Arabian, Islamic inspired. And to jump totally in scale, but a little with nature, it's an aquarium in North Jutland in Denmark, which is about the North Sea, the sea outside between England and Denmark and Norway. And the idea here was first to make all scenography of this area. So it's both the ships with the people in, it's the nature, it's the harbors, it's the all life around this area. But that's not the important part. This was the first attraction we made, where we actually was investigating what a so-called family attraction is. And the problem was that a family attraction actually splits the family. Because you have the little kid, they want to see one thing, and the teens want to see another thing, and you meet in the canteen or when you go out, so you actually don't meet. Because you're going in all directions. You must have tried that a couple of times. So we tried to do something totally different, that we make the aquariums, the biotops, and the scenography surrounded with benches for the grandparents, fishing gear thing for the husband to read on, and so forth and so on. So we actually combined everything around a cluster. So all generations was, you can say, underlined in each of the positions in the attraction. And then, since 1997, I was headhunted by the CEO, Lars Lipst. I have been attached to Tivoli. And at that time, we had around about 2.3 million guests a year. And it had been declining for 10-15 years. And I got round about $100 million of the board to make investments in sort of a timeline of 7 years, 5 to 7 years. And the problem with Tivoli, you can say, and the good thing about Tivoli is the history, of course. There is so much history in it, so every time you touch anything in there, then everyone is screaming up. On the other hand, you had to get the link into one of the most important things about Tivoli, the generations. That if Tivoli skips a generation because people don't go there, then Tivoli loses really many visitors. And we lost my generation. We lost 15 years because Tivoli was was sort of old and it was not trendy to go in and so forth. So we actually lost a whole generation. And that generation then don't go in with their kids, and the kids doesn't learn Tivoli and so forth and so on. So that was one of the big issues to get that going. That was why I designed the Demon, which is a coaster inspired by China, and I restored the old 100-year-old Chinese tower. We made new boats, for example, the Golden Tower, entrances, landscaping, renovation and building. We call it sort of the alibi strategy. On one hand, we renovated some of the old stuff, and then we could make some new stuff over in the other corner, so they didn't scream too much, all the visitors. And then there was the opportunity, which you are also going into up here in Iceland, of course, finding new things. That could be large things, small things. And this is a smaller one. It's illuminations, we call it. And I was the leader on the design of this. And it's on the Tivoli Lake. And the Tivoli Lake is a part of the Copenhagen fortification. So that's a national listed monument. So you can't sort of do anything about it. But we could make something under the water, so we in the night could make a water light pantomime and then add a new product, which was a new technology platform or based firework idea in that sense. So that was one thing that attracts people as an event and gives value to the overall brand. And then the big, you can say, the big investment was the Christmas fair. There was no Christmas fair in Denmark before, so that's very easy. Big success. And this began in '94, I think, and it was free, and we rented some huts from the municipality, and then there was no light, but it was just a little sort of fair starting up. And when Lars and me was discussing it first time, we then went to the board and then said, yes, we need $200,000 or $300,000, plus we will put a fee on, so you have to pay entrance to get in, and so forth and so on. And they said, you are totally insane, guys. And then we called Mr. John Loring, which is head of design in Tiffany, New York. It's him that has designed the snowflake over Park Avenue, you guys that have seen that. And that has been the biggest discussion because it may not look like a David star or a religious star. It should be a snowflake and blah, blah. So he was a master in light and political issues. And so we asked him to come to Copenhagen and look at the Christmas market. And he has visited us ever since, every Christmas, and bringing new ideas. And the idea we came up with was to using the weeping willows as fireworks, fireworks sort of icons. So we hanged a lot of light on them and used the light, which is the backbone of Tivoli. When you think about Tivoli in the night, it's light. So it's just a prolonging of what we already have and underlining of that. And then we got 700,000 guests instead of 200,000. So the board was very quiet. And we have but there is this problem with this Christmas market. That is, of course, only in a period which is given every year. And we can move people from the weekdays, from the weekends out to the weekdays. So we are actually going in what we are calling our peak design day, that we have a capacity that is really, really hard run. Like I hear you have in the summertime. But getting people to move to the other days, very difficult, because a Christmas weekend is what you do with your family and so forth. So there we have some things to work with on this. And then we have, I haven't a picture of that, but I haven't designed it, but it's a great event. We have a Halloween now here in the autumn holiday in Denmark, where we have 300,000 guests in 10 days coming in. So this all together adds up by around about 4 million guests a year annually, where the 3 million are summer guests and the rest is over the seasons. And that's a steady figure. We have to work on it because you know that live in the Øresund region around about 2 million. So we have around about 20% tourists, a little less. So you can see everyone visit us more than one time. So we also have to work with our product all the time. In my notion, we would, if we didn't do anything in Tivoli, we would lose around about 0.5 to 1 million guests, is my sort of guess, if we didn't work with it. So, rapid prototyping at the destination Iceland. It's and the next one is even better. That's a theme park. I knew I would woke you up there. I've talked to Disney, Universal, and they are keen on. And I saw Snow White there on one of the slides, so you're in. No, of course, theme parking is not what we're going for, but it is one of the best and most creative businesses I've been in. I was when I was visiting Disney first time, sort of, well, how would that work with Donald Duck and all that, and I just want to hug sort of Goofy and whatever. It was really great, and they were so creative, the Imagineers, they called the designers in Disney, fantastic. And there are some basic things about theme park planning which are sort of good to look at. And I know a lot of this you have looked upon, so I'm just pacing up, you can say. And the first thing is Jean-François Blondel, a French guy you all need to know. Very, very famous lecturer in these days where encyclopedia and knowledge was very important for all Europe. And he was the first architect to describe some principles about how is a backbone in a good attraction in a good theme park. And Tivoli is actually planned by this, so it's not totally random in Tivoli. It's actually the architect that originally designed it was inspired by this guy. And he has 4 points. The first is infrastructure, the second is roads, and the third is topography, and the fourth is design. And if you go in on infrastructure, then he stated in 1760 that you need to be on a boulevard. Well, boulevards can be many things here in the world. So you are on a fly boulevard between the one country and another. And I use the example of Oman, which I've been working in with some development down there. And they have a fantastic country, but they are not on a highway, we have to say. You have to go to Zurich or Istanbul, or it's a little difficult to get there. So you have a prime sort of infrastructural flow in that sense. The second thing is that Mr. Blondel says that in order to get as many exciting views and new experiences, everything has to be curved and angled like an old English garden. And because all your volcanoes and things, you have the fantastic views from each road around in the system. The third is the topography, the hills, having a landscape that is have a variation. You can see Denmark falls a little out of this, but we will work with it. And the last one is equally fantastic. There is the design need to have some ambience being different. I have to say that I always have loved Studio Grande's work between nature and totally modern thing, or modern design in the sense. When I just here for 3 weeks ago saw Haba, I was very, very impressed. I've just been down seeing Casa de Musica of Rem Koolhaas in Porto, and I think it's equally a match. So that's you have a great asset there also. So if we check out the points, we are on the winning road with Iceland, making a theme park. But what is then one of the problems? The previous speakers has talked about some of this. One of the first thing is authenticity and originality. It's not only in the product, it's also in the sort of experience of the product. And one of the things why tourists like Tivoli is because they meet Danes. If Tivoli only was for tourists, it wouldn't attract so many, is our notion. And that's always a balance because you are so few, sorry to say it, but so you have a crucial number between your tourists. Well, there are tourists you can throw out at the Vatnajökull or wherever you throw them. But there are tourists that will experience some originality. And we have a holiday resort which has the same problem as Lanzarote, Løkken up in North Jutland. And there was 800 inhabitants and around about 25,000 summer tourists. And they had to close down camping sites and things like that in order to get the figure down, because people was beginning to choosing this destination. They didn't choose that destination because it was so fake in the notion of meeting just a little Dane or something slightly Danish. So authenticity is not only the product, but it's also the experience. Then the secure experience is what you can say that's the overall headline, but it is that it's easy to plan, it's easy to accessibility is easy. It's also secure in safety matters and so forth. And we have talked about this easy access. Planning in advance is of course one thing that we have talked about in the previous. That is that the internet is there, and that is a part of the overall planning. The technological platforms would always be there now, and they would evolve, so you have to adapt to them all the time in the system. And then there's the unique me, because there is this position again, that because it's global, we are calling them in the school system Christmas kids, because they're standing like a Christmas tree in the middle of the family, and then everyone is attached like a bubble around them, and they don't attach to other entities, so you don't have the same sort of social fabric in the society as you had before. But that's also an impact compared to making attractions. And this is, in my notion, one of the biggest evolutions that have been made in many years. Not this particular phone, of course, we don't show, but the idea that you have round about 5 or 7 or 10 products worldwide that are totally the same. And then they are tailored on them, on the apps and on the interface and all the settings as your personal thing. But you accept that they are totally global, that you don't have it, and they're actually totally the same. And then if you came 20 years ago and said that the world would be a gadget that everyone owned in the whole world, you'd say that's totally science fiction and James Orwell. It should be individualized. So that's a fantastic thing, and that could be added to your country, of course. That because of all this, there's a lot of apps in Iceland that can tailor this experience of Iceland totally. Then one of it's also been mentioned before, but it's just to say that because all are working with attractions and adding on and supporting value around the attractions, then it's very easy to get totally lost. Because there is competition from shopping malls for everything, and I'm working with some shopping malls in Denmark, and the first problem is that they're the same shops in all of them. So that's the beginning, and that's all the same kind of architecture. They are all situated outside the city, and so it's sort of a little headache to find what is unique about them. But it's just to say that you need like the light in Tivoli in the Christmas time. It's light from the summer that is transformed into the winter. That's a direct link nobody else can make. And that's also the links you're going to make in your attraction development. Then we made, just for the fun of it, a small test. What is Tivoli? And actually the very beautiful picture from New Zealand before pure New Zealand came with all the things on that Tivoli. Our marketing department is going insane of, is it music, is it rides, is it this and that, is it flowers, or what are we going to marketing this year? And if we ask our guests, then there are two big things. The one is the main experience, the overall being in the garden, and with all the elements. That's 99% saying that that's the main reason to be there. And then it's the secure environment situated in the middle of the city with a gated thing, cast members on each end, and you have a secure environment. You can let your kid loose, and you are together with all the family inside the garden. So we made this and it is rapid prototyping as I started, that you have all these kind of experiences, 1 hour, 3 hours, 1 day, 1 week, and we're getting giving the headline, The Secure Adventure, because and that's a working title, that's not a selling title, of course. Nobody wants Secure Adventure. But everyone wants, of course, to be secure that they come back. So we have a master planning, super secure guy here that I picked up in the airport, guided, planned, visit, food, departure, everything is planned, and they have a treat of a time. There's a picture of them on an Icelandic horse, and there's a picture in the volcano, and they go home and they have been sheer James Bond. Then the next one, and then it's of course made so you can get lost in 2 hours every place, and they are waiting. They are waiting on you, of course, and you are counted when you go into the bus again. But it's still secure in many ways. And then the one usually my family is getting into, getting totally lost. And sometimes we get back, and that's. But you have the potential of all of them, which I think is fantastic for the country because of the sort of mix between high tech and nature and culture you have. So what would be needed in order to work with this? And this is seen as sort of a very holistic matrix between things, both the first infrastructural things, of course, but also these elements that you need a good infrastructure, the technological platforms we talked about. Then you have these 4 down here, the critical number of attraction, situation of each, length of stay, target group of each place. And that's sort of where you can say, for example, if you go in and look at the family-orientated attractions in Iceland, they are sort of not very many of them. And length of stay, is that controlled? Could we keep people longer there? Would there be better value? Would they understand things? Or use more money? That's actually why we do it, of course. Use more money. And a number of attractions. All this is about rate of recommendation, which is our key point, that people would go out on all the platforms verbally afterwards and recommend to go to Iceland in the system. Then just driving up and having a film set totally sort of bandwagon thing on one side and then a picture from the other side of this. This is for me a fantastic duality of the Icelandic thing, and that's me. I've got fat and lost my hair, but I still think thin, I have to say. But it was the first time I was in Iceland, and I had a crisis when I was 30 years, so I thought some James Bond-like thing should be. So Vatnajökull was the place I had to go. But the funny part here is, of course, that I visit, and you can see the scale is correct, Iceland and Japan over here, on the same trip. And the funny part was that the thing we've lost in Denmark, our nationality in the sense, not nationalism because we have these right-wing idiots, but they sort of our national thing, we don't have so many traditions. They are sort of eroded out in the system. When I then visited Japan and Iceland at the same time, your history is just present. It's not something you drag down, it's just there. It's just going around in the society. The culture is also a part in your language, in everything you do. It's modern still, and of course the nature is a part of it in both countries, with the mountains in the middle of Japan and the whole area here. And it was fantastic. I thought that after that, your discussions between how should we transform it and so forth are very, very sound and very, very important. But you have a very good touchstone on all this you have to start with, because it was there's so much quality, I think. So it's just a way to find out, and I think it's trial and error. It's the only way, because there's not so many countries that has this, you can say, gift like you in Japan, that you actually have so much history in the baggage, which means so much for the country. So that's great. Then, of course, we have talked about how the internet is important, and how before and after the actual trip is important. And one of the things, when you are present in Europe and you are present in the US, and you have people running through Keflavik, then you could work with Microsoft's newest product. They just made a 20 patent product thing in the US for this, where they use all the living room as a technology platform. It's like a Kinect in advanced model, 3D. My sketch here is, of course, a Segway with a helicopter thing on. That technology should shift all the time, but your films, and there we have help from New Zealand. He has offered Jackson as instructor. No, here we have the films, which are totally unique, which nobody can compete with you. So you could actually have these touchstones or small outposts out in the world, telling about your product in a fairly cheap way, but still with a lot of impact and a lot of, you can say, attack on the perception, as I started with, which is super important. This is just to tell you that this is a project we have up at this aquarium also, which is a wellness with salt water and the learning of salt water and the skin and so forth. And then it's attached to a play field where it's entertainment for the kids with different animals and water elements here. And it's a small Tivoli. You can see that the family is gathered around there. So you just need, this is the Blue Lagoon, you just need a play field beside. Then that's solved. And then we have, of course, going into the nature. This is Torell in Flagstaff that has used a volcano as an art object, and light projects, the sort of nature as sort of artificial elements. But the idea here is, of course, that in the winter time, again, it would be difficult to go in and compete with the Christmas market, with skiing holidays and so forth in the high season, because you're going where you went with your dad down in Austria and blah, blah, blah. So you have to go in and attack on the, for example, city breaks or festivals, events and so forth. And it is a little dark up here. Slightly. So light would be sort of like you have on Harbour, for example, could be some things. And you need Bill Clinton or Ralph Lauren or something like to design it, so you get a MacGuffin out of that also, of course, so you can marketing that. And the last picture is just to say that memorabilia never dies. When my father died, then his trip over in the north in 1967, with Japanese Airlines, I found that down in a sort of, we need such things to my kids are from Iceland here. So we link memorabilia is not only on all the digital platforms, but it's actually also all the stuff that we remember these experiences with. So that was the words. Thank you.